Well, good evening and welcome to this month's edition of The Edge. As always, I'm your host, Trevor Lewington. Thanks so much for joining us. On the third Thursday, I'm talking to community and business leaders who are having a real impact across Southern Alberta and beyond. And my guests, as always, are sharing their insights on how to grow your business, grow your community, and build your life. Tonight will be no exception. I have with me my special guest this evening, Joey Hundert. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Trevor.
Even though you live in Toronto currently, we won't hold that against you because I know you were cheering for the Oilers last night when 100%. They won.
100%. It was a terrifying game. Why did they had to wait till overtime to score? I mean, yeah. But I was very happy to see
So the boys have redeemed themselves. It's okay. We can move forward.
They're amazing.
Awesome.
And the Leafs got trounced. I'll try not to laugh or smile.
Well, there may be some people from Toronto out there. Okay. Now, you and I have known each other since about 2016 when we were working to bring the world's first and probably only green carnival to Lethbridge. Sustainable was your business then. Can you maybe talk a little bit about your early entrepreneur journey? Because I feel like that was one of those businesses that most people probably wouldn't even think of.
So, Sustainable, the world's first green carnival, all the rides run on waste vegetable oil, wind, and solar power, was an early thought to me. When in my late teens, I became really concerned about the carrying capacity of the planet, and I got really interested in sustainable technologies. And the more I dug and the more I researched, I did find really interesting sustainable solutions to most problems. And it amazed me that so few people knew about them, whether it was solar panels or biofuels. Turned out it was just really early, and things weren't necessarily affordable yet.
You were a little ahead of your time, okay.
Yes, an early adopter, but even at a young age, I could appreciate that even when the technology got there, people's behaviors have a lot of mass. There's a lot of tradition in people's even purchasing decisions. So I knew that it would take a while to get people around to those decisions. And I thought, well, gee, how do you get children and families excited about sustainable technologies? And this weird thought popped into my head. It literally just showed up as two words: the biodiesel gravitron. And I thought, okay, let's take waste vegetable oil, convert it to biodiesel, and power a gravitron with it.
Because who wouldn't love that?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And so within minutes, I'm on the early version of the internet looking for a used gravitron to buy. Found one for $86,000. Did not buy that gravitron. However, the idea sort of cemented. And it would take years for the whole concept to form. Me realizing, oh, I could do a whole sustainable carnival. And what that meant to me was, the more I researched it, the more sense it made, because 160 million Americans go to the state or county fair. And
it is a common summer pastime. It's something we all have done or will do.
Yes. And millions of Canadians as well. So the more I thought about it as a nonprofit, as an educational platform, it made more and more sense. And then I just had to try it. And then on January 29th, 2011, at the Freezing Man Festival in Edmonton at the Expo, we debuted 4 rides running on waste vegetable oil. And then that message went around the world. I woke up in the morning to being front page on newspapers across Canada. And then we got a call from so many different American urban centers. So that was 4 rides, 5,000 people, Edmonton, Alberta. And within 8 weeks, we were running 20 rides in Little Rock, Arkansas for 250,000 people.
Wow. Mm-hmm. What a cool sort of swing up and transformation almost overnight. But
it was wild.
But the message clearly resonated.
Yeah. And that was just make it exciting. Just make it awesome. There's no need to lecture to people. It's not about that at all. Behavior change happens slowly, and make it fun, make it awesome. And yeah, I mean, the way that Little Rock embraced us was pretty awesome. And from there, we actually, our home became Fort McMurray. The next year, we went up to McMurray and played Sustainable for Fort McMurray. And that started a 13-year run in Fort McMurray.
Yeah, they were very supportive of the idea and partnering with you, right?
Indeed. They had run the Blueberry Festival from time immemorial, but it had just sort of petered out, and nobody picked up the fare from there, and it just coincided. We showed up and said hi right at the right time, and so when we deployed Sustainable on the Snai River on a gravel parking lot. By the way, it rained for 4 days straight.
Awesome.
And McMurrians are a hardy bunch. They came out and rode the rides anyways with it. They're awesome people. The show got bigger every year, and we engaged with more of the NGO, nonprofit, government layers, community. Like, you've got a very engaged pocket of people in McMurray. They kind of wear a bunch of hats. They're on the board of the theater. They've got a day job. They volunteer. So we just got really plugged in, and it was in a cool time in McMurray's trajectory as they were really open to new ideas.
Okay.
So we went up, every year for 13 years, and the entire town would come.
Now, I have vivid memories of the version that was here in Lethbridge, and sort of you actually were able to demonstrate. I think it was a plexiglass sided container that showed how canola is actually, and biodiesel is converted into this fuel, and it was I'm having fun and I'm eating cotton candy and I'm going on the Ferris wheel, and I don't think there was a Gravitron, if I'm honest, but it was this really hands-on way to learn, like in your face. Here's how this works and here's why it matters.
Yeah. So yeah, we bought this. We licensed a trailer from University of Manitoba, and they had constructed this trailer called Flower Power, the flower being canola. And it was this awesome shrunken down industrial biodiesel making process. It had all of the tanks and the vessels. They even had a calorimeter, and they had other scientific equipment inside, and they even had a cold press. So you could go straight from canola right through to polished, finished biodiesel out of this public demonstration. And we would walk the public through it. It was an attraction. You could just walk through it, and we had lab coats on, and and we had an amazing chemist on board actually, who contributed his time because we could not afford him. But he was great at making biodiesel and explaining it to the public. And so this was one of the attractions to come and learn how. And we would take a silo of canola seed, the size of the amount of canola required to run the show for 5 days if you squeezed the canola oil out of it. And so you could just see this attraction, a big plexiglass silo of canola seed right through to the finished product. And we would make as much of the fuel on site as we could.
Yeah, because I feel like today that people are so disconnected from how that product they're eating or using in their household that's in their hand. They don't understand supply chain. They don't understand how things got to them, never mind how they're made. And so that to me is just a way of making it very tangible.
That's the thing. Energy is really hard to get your mind around the quantity of it. How much does it weigh? It's hard to get a sense for what you're using. Natural gas is invisible. It's the major fuel of North America.
Yeah.
It moves more than anything, and nobody will ever see it.
Yeah.
And so how do you create an equivalency for somebody to say, you just used 6 tree trunks or something like that, right? You've got to render it into something so you can at least make an analogy, and then you can give it value,
right,
and make it a trade-off decision from there. But I mean, commodities are commodities, and what society's built on is what we're built on. But the carnival was more about thinking about interesting new ways that are exciting that may become cost competitive in the future. And it's interesting, now Canada has a renewable fuel standard. There's biodiesel blended into all diesel in the country in the summer months, and there it is.
Yeah, does it surprise you that it either took that long or that it's even happened, that we now have standards around biodiesel, we now have renewable natural gas, like all of the things you helped to pioneer and bring to the forefront that were existing but hidden are now very much front and center, both in government policy and industry looking for those solutions?
Not a surprise anymore, because I'm 44 and I have 3 children, and I've learned to trust society a lot more. The long curves for society are incredibly positive. It's only when you zoom in and try to look quarter to quarter, year to year, that you're like, hey, wait a minute. But if you look at all the curves for society, most of them have gone in the right direction over, say, 10,000 years, and certainly several hundred years. Whether it's violent deaths, whether it's emissions per capita, whether it's starvation, infant mortality, we're going in the right direction by and large.
We make the right decisions, we implement the right technologies, we do the homework, we get there in the end.
We're emergently driven by the need to protect our young. That's number one. And by doing that, we plan longer and longer. The insurance industry is built from that, I think, us trying to create some certainty, the ability to care for our young, protect our family, and it radiates out from the household. So I think ultimately we're propelled by those instincts, and that causes a desire for stability, a desire for a cleaner, healthier life and lifespan, and ultimately, if you can get to the top of Maslow's hierarchy, human flourishing. And societies that get to human flourishing, A, are incredibly lucky, blessed, lucky, and get there. And it's their responsibility to try to extend that back down and make the journey from nasty, brutish, and short through to a PhD in whatever you like.
And refined and, yeah.
Sure. And that happens. That is happening. And so that's a hope. So I'm not surprised anymore that we seek to clean things up, cause less disease, be more responsible about water and air. That's what we do. And over time, I mean, in 1,000 years, I think that riddle was solved. It's just, what do we do in the meantime?
Okay. I want to pick up on the theme of journey, because you've had a fairly significant entrepreneurial journey throughout your career. I think it's something like 60 some startups you've been a part of. Can you talk a little bit about some of those that sort of resonate with you and sort of some of the process along the way?
My first business was a computer company that I started when I was 13.
Okay.
In my neighborhood, just fixing computers, because computers were new. And I became totally fascinated by computers. But I've always been a bit of a salesman. And I tend to sell and agree to things before I actually have the capacity, or I used to do more of that, hopefully. So I put these flyers around the neighborhood that I could fix computers. And I had read a bunch about how to do it. And I had experimented on my own computer. But I started to get these gigs and contracts. I'll never forget the first one I got. Somebody asked for a simple RAM upgrade. This is a chip that you just snap into place on the motherboard. I was sweating so hard they brought me a towel and a glass of water. And 35 minutes later, I just wasn't pushing hard enough on it, because I get like one last felt and
click.
Snapped into place. Everything was fine. So yeah, that was like when I was 13. I remember when I was 7, I wanted to start a lemonade stand, and I was very serious about this, and convinced my dad to build me a shack on wheels. I was like, I need to be able to move the lemonade stand. So in any case,
market access is important.
Yeah. Move to the market.
So this was very early. It's been, you're hardwired for entrepreneurship. Would you say right from day one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. And taking stuff apart and understanding it and trying to bash things together that people don't typically put together. Those slot cars, the little electric, I mean, they're coming back a little bit, but
yeah,
you can get a little home one, and the cars drive around a track, and you squeeze this trigger, which gives it more current, and it goes faster. Well, that was cool, but I got bored, and so I took the adapter, and I'm 4, and I found a way to cut the wires, strip the wires. Now I have 2 live, electrical current.
Every homeowner's perfect scenario. That's great.
But I took the motors out of the cars, and I wired them up, and I made little drills out of them. And back in the day, McDonald's used to make hamburger containers that were styrofoam, and I would drill little designs into them. And so my mom comes into my room, and I've got all this styrofoam fluff flying around. And so in any case, so some of the technical kind of put things together in a weird way, yes. So now from there, the computer company, I started a web design business, and I started selling furniture online in the early days of the internet, which totally did not work. And then, once I started to think about the world's issues, sort of everything tilted towards sustainability.
Okay.
As of about 18, 19, me thinking about carrying capacity, thinking about where the world was going, I decided I needed to learn venture so that I could scale sustainable technology solutions as fast as possible. And that was a fork. So everything went in that direction.
Okay.
And that led to trying to start a charter bus line that ran on waste vegetable oil. That didn't work. Power generation running on vegetable oil also didn't work.
Okay.
I did start a biodiesel company that worked. Set up a collection ring for restaurants, and we were collecting from 120 restaurants, making biodiesel, selling it, that kind of thing. That worked. I got into investment capital also. I was really interested in investment capital and was a part of a couple funds, small VC funds, and just learning the capital side. I did some tidal energy, some wind stuff, eco-village development, straw bale houses. I did some oilseed stuff and worked with farmers on how to add value with their waste, how to make energy out of, let's say, canola meal or straw. I did a bunch of hemp stuff, hemp composite stuff, flax composites. Did a bunch of hemp seed, oilseed stuff, and just a bunch of stuff.
Like a catalog of sustainability initiatives and projects. Okay.
And then I got into manufacturing. I started an eyewear company. We made eyewear from sustainable wood. We would harvest old wood from different cool construction projects, make eyewear out of it, iPhone cases. And then, the carnival became a platform to consult to municipalities in the strangest way. We would go to town, we would bring this huge show and execute it, and then mayors would be like, hey, wait, that was awesome. Can you fix our recycling program?
Okay.
That kind of thing. So we actually started a consulting branch called Sustainable Municipal Works, and we got hired by cities to fix some gnarly problems, and that was just another and then I got to see sort of a greater scale of challenge, and that was really cool. And then one mayor said, "Hey, we're a food desert and we're a winter city. What do we do if the highway shuts down?" And I said, "Well, build an indoor farm.
Just grow your own. What's the problem?"
And then she was like, "Great." I was like, "Yeah, great." She's like, "No, great. Like go do it."
Thank you for calling.
"Oh."
Yeah, okay.
So we got a contract to build 3 shipping container vertical indoor farms, which produce fish on the bottom and plants on top. And we actually did it. It was insane. But we built these shipping container vertical farms, and that's when I could see the potential of indoor farming. And I ended up spinning out Sustainitech, which was an indoor agriculture company that I worked on for a decade, and scaled from that contract to a venture-backed, multi-million-dollar outfit building ever larger farms. And so that was another one of the pathways.
But I mean, I think it shows interesting how, until that conversation with that mayor, which arose out of the sustainable, the festival, the carnival and everything there, the whole conversation around this closed environment and containerized food production, that was never even in your brain.
I had a mentor early on who was looking at how to use industrial waste heat in Alberta to heat greenhouses. So food production was, and I had also made friends with this group of spin farmers. Spin farming was this idea of like, till your backyard, plant vegetables, start selling them at farmers markets. There was also the producers we were working with on hemp seed. Those were big producers with big combines and big machines. So I was around farming, and I was around vegetable production and some greenhouse stuff. And I don't know why, when that mayor asked me, "What do we do?"
It just came together.
That's like the adapter and the little motors and the start. Like, just some strange idea came together. I was like, "Oh, this is the way you do that," but it had never really been done like that. So I have no idea why I thought that would be a way to do it.
Okay.
And it was hard, by the way, but it did work. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Now I know you lecture at Wharton, and you've given advice to many classes of students over the years. I mean, does that early journey, like, are there lessons that you've learned there that you sort of replicate for them and share with them? And do you see sort of recurring themes in the questions? I guess, what do students ask, and how do you pull from the library?
So we'll put aside the fact that a lot of those students ask how to raise capital, and we can go into that as little or as much as you want. I happen to love raising investment capital.
Oh, we're going to go there. Absolutely.
There's an art and a practice to it, and so great. But other stuff is how to propel oneself through the entrepreneurial journey. A lot of, startup has gotten really popular, really hot, and not everybody should be in it. I think in like the early 2000s into the 2010s, it was like anybody can be an entrepreneur. Everybody should try a startup, and that's not actually great guidance, because as it turns out, there's like a set of traits that you can develop. By the way, it's self-determinant. It's not how you're baked can help or hurt, but you can influence these things. But it'd be like saying everybody should be a ballerina, everybody should be an F1 driver.
Me doing ballet, not good.
Same. So it's highly specialized. You have to be able to take an amazing amount of punishing inbound, right? So it's a very high contact career, and you get destroyed a lot. So you have to have the ability to pick yourself back up. So one of the things I find that helps is to have a value that's propelling you. Now, for some people, just the love of money seems to be able to do it. That wasn't me. I marvel at that. But some people are so locked in on being wealthy that's their
whole reason for driving forward and going after the opportunity.
And some people literally are wired like that, and they will go and do it, and they will take all that suffering and continue. But most people aren't wired like that. For me, it was care of, like, human flourishing matters so much to me. Care of humans is what really propelled me into entrepreneurship at all. I'm just a huge empath, and I have to do something with that. And I picked venture because it was the fastest. And then I wanted to learn everything about it so I could fulfill a mandate. So for students, I say, if there's a value propelling you, you're so much more durable, because it turns out these pathways are incredibly hard. Most people don't have the fortitude to handle the number of no's that, like, people saying no to you on the path for years.
And what would you say that ratio is? Like, how many no's did you get out of the pitches you did?
I've pitched hundreds of funds, and I've been said yes to by 9 to 15 of them. Like, the ratio of in a fundraise, and like an investment fundraise, you do prepare to pitch 100 funds so that you can find one.
So it's 1 out of 100 or less.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right. Others will say yes, but you also have to like them too. So they might say yes, but they might be mean. And you're like, oh.
And have really nasty terms and conditions.
Dude, yeah. And you're like 10 years with this person. And you have to make that decision as an entrepreneur, as a person. These are such long relationships. Startup is like a 7 to 15 year cycle at this point. If you're software, maybe it's 3 to 10 years. But if you're touching the built environment, 7 to 15 years. And so when you pick a funder, they're a business partner.
Yeah, they're along for the ride for a long time. You better get along and have trust and all of those things.
Yes, yeah. It's an interview. It's a two-way interview. So yeah, the propensity to underestimate the complexity of the world, which all entrepreneurs do, and then to build a first concept or build a prototype and launch it into the world and have it get just obliterated, have it be nothing like you imagined, and then the real work goes in of actually improving the product to get it to work, to get it to do its intended thing. And you have to be able to be changed by that and not get mad or not lose your focus or not get discouraged. It's like a partnership between you and the world, and you're synchronizing with it more than it's synchronizing with you. And so taking that feedback on board, changing yourself, changing the product, keeping a goal in mind, but adapting and accommodating the whole way. You have to be so flexible. It's way less like bulldoggedly fulfilling you could do that with a smaller business, but if you're really going out to scale something, there's more listening and adapting involved that I think people are aware of. And it takes something to have your first idea just trounced.
Completely stopped, yeah.
So those people call it pivoting, and that's like a nice compact word, but the emotional process, the human process in there is, depending on how hard you're holding on to your ideas, and the harder you're holding on to your ideas, the more painful it is to pivot and to get to where the real solution is.
And I get it. For inventors, this is their baby. They put their blood, sweat, and tears. It represents their life's work potentially. That's hard to let go. Yeah. But to your point, many of the entrepreneurs we see that we advise often are not willing to be open to feedback. It's like, well, that's the market talking to you. Like, that's where it starts. You should probably stop now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can hear it in somebody because they'll make everybody else wrong, because it's too painful to admit that they were wrong.
Right.
And hey, I have huge room in my heart for that, because it's actually pretty rare to find somebody who's immediately like, oh, I screwed up again. I mean, that's the fastest way to get to the right moves. But most people have a bit more invested than that.
So how did you pick yourself up? I mean, to be told no so many times, to have your idea, concept, thing crushed. How do you pick yourself up and move forward? Because that's not an easy thing for people to do.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a manual for that one. I don't know. I just know that. Well, let me try to be more thoughtful than that. I've been told a lot by people that I have that capacity. Okay, here's one. I'm a little brother.
Okay.
And my older brother is handsome and super coordinated and great at everything, right? Like, he's amazing, and he's my best friend, and I love him to death. And when we were 7, we're not best friends.
Right.
He beat me at all the things. So I think like some fortitude. Now, if I just just took my marbles and played with nobody, that wouldn't have been fun either. So I think I learned a certain amount of resilience from being a little brother early on. So there's some grit in that.
Right.
And I don't know where the dogged determination came from. Again, it's values. I really desperately love people at scale. Like, I really love the idea of what we are and what we can fulfill, and it really does propel me. And then the older I got, the more I knew that I was playing a numbers game every time, and it was a game of attrition, and the likelihood of success was opened up by getting back up again, because then you can carry forward the learnings. It's so painful to get run over, but you stand up 2 times smarter if you listened while it was happening.
So if you're open to it and you hear it and you do something different this time. Yeah. And
that can even be folding one venture to start another one. But that's important. But a lot of people will take that bruising and then they'll make a story about it. Oh, it was the weather, it was the government, it was my XYZ. And then they didn't integrate the learnings. So the next time is going to be even harder, because now they're ossified in the belief of it's somebody else's fault.
Right.
So I think it came from those places. That's a really hard one to dissect.
Okay.
On oneself. But you can see it on somebody, and it's trainable. It's trainable, but then that person has to give their trust to the coach.
Right.
And not everybody's coachable.
Right. And having a good mentor, having a good coach is important. Has there been people in your life that have helped that process? Is there someone that stands out, or a set of skills that have been passed to you that way?
Dozens.
Okay.
That was one of the things. I didn't go to university. I didn't formally trained in anything. I'm like self-taught on most things, but the one thing I learned early was to find mentors and coaches and to like latch onto them and have them like become friends and get close and want to invest. So, I mean, dozens, Trevor, economists, inventors, engineers, welders, investors, kind of anybody. That was one of the things. I don't know why I figured that one out. And that goes back a ways. I'm trying to think of like the first one, and it goes too far back to the asymptote of really
It's just embedded. It's a part of the journey.
It's in the Hall of Mirrors. But lots of them. And there was a humility to that too. And I wasn't humble in every way, not by any stretch, but that way, I don't know why. I was totally open to, I could hear the sound of experience. You could tell, there is a sound of somebody who knows.
Yeah, it's just wisdom,
Yeah.
right? At some point.
Yeah, you can hear it on somebody. So I was totally willing to take their guidance. I was doing all this stuff I didn't know how to do. So when somebody would properly sit me down and be like, hey, that's a lot of piss and vinegar. How about some knowledge? And I would accept it. I would totally take it on board. Now that can go too far too, because I did have the experience early on of like too closely mapping their belief system or their thoughts or their
and not being true to yourself and doing what you need to do. Okay.
Yeah. And then over time, then you start to see things not work out for that person, and then the question comes like, oh, maybe they're not right about everything, and then you become a prosumer of the mentorship services, and you get wiser about even that, taking knowledge on. So yeah, but there's been a couple that have taken the whole ride, that I've been mentored by. For here's another thing: mentorship relationships often turn around.
Right.
You start as the mentee, and then there's like a trade, and then you can end up as the mentor. It really depends on what life arc you're on. I mean, the number of mentors that I'm teaching these days how to use AI are many, but it also gets to life wisdom. We're not all on the same track, and so sometimes you end up smarter. Sometimes you end up more experienced than the mentor,
right?
Because you're in a different time compressor. There's more life going through the system.
Yeah, no. I mean, I've seen a number of times where some of my mentors have become students of mine, and they're important people to me, and you want to help them on their own journey. And it's just it's nice to be able to contribute back and make it a mutual exchange in many ways.
Yeah, which takes more humility, because like earlier me would have been like, oh, well, I guess that's that.
I'm done.
Yeah, but then the heart opens up and you're like, oh, I owe that person too.
Right.
They contributed a lot.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
We'll shift gears a little bit then. You're now on more on the investment side than you are on the entrepreneurship side, still involved in many businesses, but you're the guy listening to pitches rather than making them, more so these days. So, for the audience who maybe doesn't understand the capital world, can you give us a bit of an overview of what's venture, what's private equity, because it gets convoluted. Before we sort of dig a little deeper, can you talk sort of about the bubble a bit?
Mm-hmm. And I wish I knew this when I started, and I wish there was a better transfer of knowledge from those who've been through it to those who are just starting. That would be awesome. It would prevent a lot of mistakes and a lot of errors. Now,
because each stream is very specific to what it can do or not do and what it needs, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they're very different. And so here's some of what I know. When it comes to the sorts of investment capital, there's different buckets for different things. And I think one of the chief metrics to be aware of is risk. There's a certain amount of risk at each stage of a business. Obviously, the riskiest time is day one. And even riskier than that is the first time you receive investment. So by and large, most businesses start with friends and family money. Friends and family is you have some savings, mom and dad, you go and shake them down, and then cousin, uncle, whomever, and rich whomever. And
best friends, roommates, cousin, whomever.
Yes. And most people can cobble together 20 grand to a couple $100,000, depending on their community, doing that. Now, that's oftentimes the easiest money. And later in one's career, one learns to be very careful about that, because it turns out to be very easy to raise that. And you have to be careful about actually providing those people in return. After friends and family money comes seed capital.
Right.
So seed capital is typically an investment ranging from 50 grand to like $250,000 per check. Big ones would be like $1 million. And it turns out there are seed investment shops.
That's all they do.
That's all they do, is they write seed checks. Here's one of the things I didn't know. These capital markets are very established, and they're very specialized, and they're very differentiated. But you have to go to market to find that out. Most cities will pretend they have a venture capital market because they want it, and so they talk like they have one. And there's clubs of investors, and there's angel investors, and that's all great, and there's a place for that, but it's not a market. And one of the pieces of guidance to those raising investment capital is you have to go to a market. You don't have to live in a market. You just have to go to the market to raise capital. Why? because you'll get priced properly. The risk will get priced properly, where you're at as a business will get priced properly. If you do it in these backwaters, these not markets, nobody knows how to value anything. And you're going to talk to an investor and they're going to value you, and you're probably going to take that value. So just one tidbit of advice is go to a market. Go to Silicon Valley, go to New York City, go to Toronto, go to Silicon Slopes, go to Austin, go to Miami, but go where there's a market.
There's expertise, there's diligence, there's systems that support. And
they really matter. Like your lawyer, for example, matters a ton. If you hire the wrong lawyer, they're not going to know the investment instruments, and they're probably going to make it way too complex and charge you a lot of money. And speaking from experience, the early investment, by the way, book that everybody should read. It's called The Secrets of Sand Hill Road. It was written in 2018. It's the best blueprint of how venture capital works, still to this day. And I've recommended that book to 5,000 to 10,000 students, people, like, who knows. I wish I got royalties on that book.
You probably should, yeah.
He's way too shrewd for that. He's a very successful investor. So that book helps lay it out. And so as a seed investment, you can typically find local seed money, but again, or you can look up seed investment shops and get priced properly and get the right size check for the right percentage of your company. It turns out all this has been done now so many times, you don't need to invent it. You don't need to invest how much your company should part with, what you should be asking for, the terminology, the pitch decks, the investment instruments. There's a paved highway for all this now. It's in that book. Y Combinator has written about this process extensively. They created an investment instrument called a simple agreement for future equity, the SAFE. It's a safe note. It's basically a contract that an investor gets to own a certain amount of your company in the future for X value. And it's a 6-page document. And there's been trillions raised under this one instrument.
Wow.
And it was invented in Silicon Valley to facilitate easy exchange between founders and investors. After seed, you go to Series A. Series A can be anywhere from $1 million check to nowadays $20, $30 million check. And by that point in time, you typically have your product well formed. Series A says, I know what we are building and it's valuable, and here's why I know it's valuable. And with this funding, I'm going to build some capacity to get it into the market. And sometime inside of that Series A, you're going to connect to meaningful revenue. Then there's Series B, and Series B can be anywhere from 10 million to 100 million. And it's all a function of how much traction did you just demonstrate in the previous 16 months or 24 months, depending. There's like a window. Most raises happen between 16 months and 3 years of the last round, depending.
But they're looking for a track record of results, demonstrated something outcomes.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you only get to, most of the time, unless it's silly season, and there have been some. 2021 was madness. Valuations were sky high and discernment was very low, and a lot of that investment has gone poof. But in most times, by Series B, you're demonstrating traction and you're really scaling your sales. You're probably already at anywhere from $5 to $20 million in revenue that you could say is probably going to recur.
Okay.
Sometimes it's called annually recurring revenue, but you have to be able to confidently show to repeat business traction by that time. Then Series C is anywhere between 30 million and 200 million, and Series D is anywhere between 70 million
and on and on and on.
Now you're supposed to go public towards the end of this rainbow, but that doesn't happen as often because that market's not. The public markets are not as efficient or approachable as it's hoped that they would be. So a lot of companies actually stay private forever, and they can grow to $50 billion, $100 billion private. So in any case, I think that the main encapsulating guidance is you do not have to invent this process. All you have to do is get educated on how it works. And there's enough material out there to get educated in such a way and then go to a market. Don't raise in a not market. Even from seed, go to these markets. And how do I get there? Go to the conference that most closely matches the space that you're desirous of. Go to find an entrepreneur's summit in that region. Cities are always doing this. Cities are always trying to attract young, new minds to their spaces.
Right.
That's how you get into those markets.
Yeah, and just about every industry has a conference of some sort that is the signature event or the main plays, and it's a little bit of Googling, a little bit of AI research, but they're out there and they're fairly accessible, I would imagine.
Yeah, you have to go. You go and like, what do I do? What do I do with myself? You be awkward like everybody else, and you bump into people and say, "Hi, my name is," and I do. Oh, and it goes from there, and then you practice the art of conversation about what you do. And it's going to go from 500 words to 20 words. You're going to perfect that conversation. And you do it there. Everything gets prototyped and then goes to production, including your conversation. So the first one's going to be crummy. And then by the time you leave that conference, you're going to have the message dialed. And if you've been listening, you're changing it subtly based on what you're hearing.
Right, responding to that feedback in real time and adjusting.
Totally.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, that's like, there's a lot of waste in investment raising processes, and people invent a lot of process. You just don't need to do that anymore.
It already exists, just follow the path.
That's it. And just don't be off market is another piece of, like, don't be too out there. You're beautiful, whole, and complete right now. Not everything about a founder has to be totally off the wall. It's okay. The product itself can be innovative and remarkable, and you as a person, but for business process, keep it as close to market as possible. If you stray from market, or if you stray from that which people expect in these processes, you just turn into friction. And they're already getting approached by so many companies. It's too easy to say no if you're off spec.
Yeah, any point of friction is just a discard, I would imagine.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, now that you're sitting on the receiving pitch side, it must be interesting to think back to things you would like to have maybe redone, or how you would have reframed some of your past pitches. Like, are there some sort of key things you look or listen for when you're wanting? What's the perfect pitch, I guess? Like, what's sort of the things that people have to nail to capture your attention?
So right now, I'm an infrastructure investor at Northleaf Capital Partners. So we're only dealing with really progressed businesses. So I'll come back from there to more like a seed Series A type pitch, and what I would be looking for as, say, a VC investor. But for right now in infrastructure, there's a few key components, and it's, what do their contracts look like? What's the size of the deal? How close are they to shovel ready? Is it truly infrastructure? Like, if you took it away from society, would there be problems? Food, medicine, power, transit, so those sorts of aspects. So we'll leave that aside for now. More so, if I could go back and sort of refine even my understanding, I wish I knew more about what investment funds were really trying to do. Because there's what's said about it, there's what's written about it, but then there's what's real. What's real for a VC fund is they're trying to provide about a 30 to 35% return back to their LPs. Their limited partners are their investors. And to produce that 35%, which is a lot. Like, if
that's a big number.
If you were to make 35% of your money every year, I mean, you'd retire pretty soon. So it's a lot. It's a high return. And how do they get that? Like 10 investments, 7 will die, 2 will do pretty good, and 1 will be a screamer. And that's really the hope. And so, but they're still looking for a stable return. And so if I had understood more that they were looking for that kind of a return and how to speak to that, I would have focused more on risk reduction than screaming potential.
Okay.
Screaming potential is cool, but more so the bottom of the business and just hitting singles, staying alive, and growing top line is more of a predictor of future success than how absolutely game-changing, disruptive, and brilliant is something. And so that's one of the pieces. So I think a lot of startup culture is like, go in, absolutely wow people, boil the ocean, change the world, and that's awesome. But I think, sticking to knitting and really understanding the fundamentals. Another thing, a lot of startup groups will pick like 3 or 5 active fronts of innovation. Only one will make it. And the more you pare down that active front of innovation to just one, otherwise, A, you look unfocused, and B, it's really too hard to innovate on multiple fronts at one time. Innovating on multiple fronts is the domain of bigger businesses. And when you actually have resources and a lot of recurring revenue, now you can have skunk works departments that are working across axes.
Yeah, you got the corporate R&D building over there, and you're good to go, right?
Yes. But in the beginning, laser focused on the one place you need to be making the product better, and everything else should be steady as she goes. Don't innovate on too many fronts. It's just too hard.
Okay. No, that's fascinating. I mean, I would imagine that the world has shifted somewhat coming out of the 2018 financial crisis. Then we had COVID. There's been a change in dynamics with technologies. Has the game changed for these funds and for capital investment, or is it sort of more of the same and it's tried and true and it stays on course?
It's changed a lot. So yes, it moves with the era. Post-pandemic, when governments flooded, capital into people's hands to avoid a global depression. So, some 40 trillion brand new dollars were invented around the world, or whatever the figure is. A lot of brand new capital was flooded into everybody's hands. And so investment capital was easy for funds to raise, and businesses were showing up and having easier and easier time raising capital. So between 2021 and 2022, I don't know how many trillions of risk capital was invested, but it was a lot. and you saw every asset class swell in real time. Everything that we all know, things just got more expensive. Buying a house, buying a building, buying a process. If you're building a plant, if you're building a data center, whatever it is, everything just got really expensive. It's because money was chasing these asset classes. So you got these huge up rounds. Companies that were worth 200 million yesterday are now worth billions. And these forward-looking estimates of what they're worth, so some multiple on gross revenue or a multiple on earnings, they just went to the moon. There were some SaaS, software as a service companies that were getting valued at like 120 times revenue, which is crazy.
Yeah, typically you're 4 to 6 times EBITDA, and you're thinking, oh, we're good, but this is like a 1,000 multiples of that.
Yeah, it was really insanity, but that's what it's so interesting. Humans adapt so fast. We're like normalization machines, so things just become normal. Either that, or there's a deeply cynical game where somebody's just playing musical chairs, knowing that someone's going to be pulling the bag. And I think it's a mix of both. I think the market normalized that this is just what the price of rapidly growing companies was, and they were writing checks to underwrite that. And also, some other funds were probably realizing, oh, this is insane, but if we stop, we're going to lose out on this bonanza. So yeah, I think post-pandemic was one of the strangest periods in private investment capital in history, and I think we've been paying for it since 2023. Things halted on the investment capital front.
Right.
2024 was slightly better. 2025 is weird for different reasons, which is a can of worms. But yeah, I think we expunged so much risk capital in those years that it's going to take a while to recoup. So yes, every time something happens in the real economy, whether it was the Great Recession in 2008, whether it was the dot-com bubble before that, you can go further back in history, looking when people are willing to part with capital for risky ventures, it's episodic. And yeah, it's totally influenced by what's happening on Main Street, in the economy, and there are big trends that can influence that. And even just the interest rate, being able to get risk-free returns from 6 to 8%, for a couple of years there, pushed a lot of capital into those investments and
Right.
away from risk assets. So there's a huge influence, and things do change. I think right now, investors are looking for profitability. Investors are looking for execution, a track record of execution, much less pie in the sky. A lot of businesses saw Amazon not need to return, cut dividends or return money to shareholders for 20 years and said that's the new model. And so you had this raft of startups that had no plan to get to cash flow, and they would just keep strapping on these up rounds, these big equity up rounds. But I think that game is kind of busted, except for AI. AI is,
It's still out there.
It is the moment, and there's something incredibly valuable there, but it's most certainly also inflated. But for most industries, if you don't have a very defined path to cash flow, a believable path, it's pretty tough to raise money right now. So I think it's less idealistic and less in the mania than it's been in a while.
Okay, and without clearly getting into the politics of the current moment, but just looking at the crystal ball, there seems to be a lot of instability. There's a lot of political risk globally for a bunch of reasons. Certainly the investment locally, I've seen sort of pull back and take a more cautious, sort of retrospective look and be like, no, well, maybe we'll wait 6 months or we'll wait. Are you seeing that trend more broadly as well?
Oh yeah, there's so many headwinds right now. For anybody looking to build a project right now, and then to look, they were probably budgeting for a long time. Big capital assets, the cycle can be years before even going for financing. So to look back at your 2020 budget and then to go to vendors now, and it's 50% more costly to build the exact same project. And not all prices have stabilized. So it's not like there's a lot of industries where they can't just turn around and sell the thing for 50% more. The customer will reject that. And so what do? So that was already a problem. Then equity markets being kind of locked up. So where you would find private equity, private capital is much more conservative for factors we just talked about. So that would be number 2. So first is everything's way more expensive to build. 2, private capital is harder to come by. 3, now you have perhaps the post-war structure of trade, global trade structure being changed.
Yeah, 80 years worth of patterns potentially tossed out, maybe, perhaps, possibly.
Yeah, and the questioning of the value of the U.S. currency as global reserve, what that all means. And so, yeah, I think you put those 3 things together, I think most C-suites are in wait-and-see mode right now. And then who can fault them? It's already so hard to plan the next productive asset in the company and have it work and cash flow and not get, over budget over time. Add those three factors that we just described, and you just shrunk the target for success to such a small target. So we're seeing a ton of that. We're also seeing some other industries that are growing like crazy. I mean, if you're legitimately in the data center space right now, and by legitimate, I mean you didn't just become a developer in the last 3 years.
You actually have some expertise in this?
Yeah. You were in the space. I don't think you can run fast enough. I also think that there's some other industries that are sort of backfilling capacity as they pivot. Reshoring is definitely happening to some effect. And so, but if a company can wait right now, I think they probably are. In infrastructure, we're as busy as we've ever been, interestingly, because infrastructure by its very nature is counter-cyclical. It's always a return,
right,
in down and up markets, and that capacity is typically waiting and has been planned for years before it's ever in front of us.
Awesome. Now, I don't want to get into the specific things that you're perhaps prospecting here this week, but it's been great to have you in the region, in the heart of Canada's premier food corridor. You have an interest in ag, but what do you see as the potential of this region? Like what brings you to Southern Alberta, and what have you noticed sort of in the last few days as you've been crisscrossing the countryside?
It's been great to be back, I spent 18 years in Alberta, and I love this place. I've been down here a lot, and I love this place that we are. Most folks outside of Alberta don't know that there's
right.
global scale production and I mean of finished goods in this region. There are global scale plants. There are global scale supply chains. What is produced here is incredible. And so when I became operating partner at Northleaf and was asked to help lead the fund into food and agriculture, I immediately thought of this place because it's mature, it's at scale, it's not all that well known about. And there's value to be had here. So it was early in my thinking, and then reaching out to you more recently and scheduling the trip, I was thinking, I wonder what's there. You have these big multinational established players, but that necessarily has to be fed by, a constellation of supply chain,
right,
and of other businesses and vendors. And then, who are the other operators who would like to be in the neighborhood? And what infrastructure do they need? How does water and wastewater look in the region? Are there any gigantic greenhouses that want to be here? Who's adding a processing line? Would they rather finance it off balance sheet? All these kinds of questions. And so really we're looking for big fixed assets on long-term contracts. And there's a lot of big fixed assets in this region, and a gargantuan scale of production, and really forward pretty amazing leadership around here as well in terms of municipally and just from a development standpoint, you guys really punch above your weight, and so it was a natural to want to come here and explore.
Okay, yeah, and we there's obviously a lot of growth in those industries, and I think there's always going to be a need to feed people. We always joke that we have a responsibility to feed the rest of the world with this growing global population, and that requires more infrastructure. So I've seen only that, and touring with your group has been really excellent, and to just look into the region more carefully, and I'm excited to continue to come back. We're patient, and we're building a new program, and it's about being in the conversation, and it's about making folks aware that we're here and that they can turn to us, and I'm excited what comes out of this trip in terms of what's the next email or the next phone call, and it might be 2 years from now, it might be sooner, who knows, but there's just such a unique and amazing suite of industries in this region, and it all merits understanding further, and there's tons of value, obviously, and it'd be great to play a part in that. I mean, I've believed that for a long time, so it's great to have that validated externally by somebody. Now, I mean, you mentioned that the cycle can sometimes be years, and I think that's one of the things that's most misunderstood about the work that my team does is, they think that investment attraction is about a phone call and a sign a deal and ribbon cutting and we're good to go. But I think about our longest file was 11 years from start to finish, right? And so this is often a multi-year process. Can you talk a little bit about why, like, as an investor, as a fund, why is there such a long cycle?
Yeah, very few things that cost $100 million and over happen in under a year. If they do, they're typically part of some larger trend, and I don't know if capital is being expended wisely. If that's the case, most things in the built environment, development is complicated. Development is just the act of where to build something, how to build something, how to provision for all the things that is going to need, and then doing it in a way that's responsible, that complies with laws, and then gets hooked up to everything it needs, and is, also profitable.
And actually functions the way it's intended.
Totally. And it's really complicated. So as a developer, I was a developer of assets myself. Siting can take years. When you build something really big and it needs access to water, power, a key input, whether that is sugar beets or corn, or whether that is enough solar to make an installation work really well, it can take a long time. You're looking for a confluence of forces. You're looking at weather. You're looking at highways. You're looking at demographics. All right, you have to hire 100 to 500 people. Are they around? Do they have the qualifications you need? Or do you need to work with the local college to have them make a program to start training people? And then 5 years later, you'll have a labor base. Point is, there's all these, development is like a Gantt chart of boxes to check just to know if you can be somewhere. And as of determining that it's a good place to be, then you have to find the actual site, which would mean 20 acres or 100 acres or whatever you're building. Is it next to the thing you need?
Right.
Is it on top of the services you need? Can you get as much of what you need? Power, water, drainage, whatever. And if so, great. Lease, buy the parcel. You can just hear these things stacking up, right? So as of the point of even finding the site and buying the site, that just starts a whole other cycle. Permitting and getting permission. Are you going to create emissions? Are you burning anything? I hope you're not burning anything, because if you're burning anything, just add 2 years. Or you're combusting something.
Yeah, there's got to be a permit for that somewhere.
Exactly. So all these things just add on, and that's why. And then there's all the business considerations. So there's a different cost to developing different projects in different regions. And that could be because it's more costly to get something somewhere. If you have a big, heavy vessel and it's made in Norway and it's going to get here on a boat, well, then what? Rail, truck? You have to consider those things. And so that's just another piece. How expensive are the trades? This is an energy province. Welders get paid a lot of money here. It's not like that in, say, Kentucky or, there's Tennessee. So there's other places where you might find it to be cheaper. So all those things come into play. And then ultimately, when you decide to do it and you budget it and you find the right groups in the world to build your plant for you to spec, and they understand it and they can insure it. So it's years. Ultimately, none of these things is less than years. And that's why. So, and then we get approached typically when permit in hand, budgets in hand, contracts in hand. So they know the engineers and the builders, and they know where all the equipment's coming from. They've got customers for what they're making, whether it's data or it's a food product. They also know exactly where their feedstock is coming from, so they've contracted the feedstock, and then we get approached for capital, and then we get to assess all that, and maybe be in competition with other funds, make a determination, and if we decide to invest, then typically all those contracts are culminated in the same moment.
Okay.
And then we capitalize something, and then the shovels go, and then 2 years after the shovels start,
then we've got a thing.
Turns on.
Right. Amazing.
Yeah.
Now, it's hard to believe our hour is almost up, and the show is called The Edge. So I'm curious, for you, how do you stay energized? How do you deal with the volume of work and things that come your way? What is it that gives you your edge?
Yeah. So I have a pretty serious meditation practice. I'm fascinated by the mind and consciousness. I don't think we know most of the story. I think we're productively entertained and distracted and meaningfully applied to work, and that's good work, but I think we have a lot more to know, and that the mind is an incredible mystery, and so is consciousness. So I was attracted to meditation because it was one of the practices that could have one experience and see the mind operate on a finer and finer degree. And
right.
Our brains do some weird stuff. The closer you look, there's even more stuff that's just weird. Conversations you may catch yourself having with yourself, those are fascinating. But do you have to have it 10,000 times in a row? Because most of us do. But we say the same thing to ourselves a lot. Like, why? And so getting in there. So meditation was one of those practices that could slow it all down, and is incredibly replenishing. And so ultimately, I find meditation more restorative than sleep sometimes. Okay. And I'm coached and mentored in that too. Because I for a lot of these systems of advancement or knowledge or where there's practice involved, it's great to have a coach or a mentor if you can find one. So meditation's huge. And my family, I mean, I have an awesome family of 3 kids and my wife, and they're amazing people who I've not just love, but have huge respect for. And so I spend as much time with my family as I can. I have pretty hard boundaries around the workday. I always have, because it's not the whole story. And thankfully, I didn't get so wrapped up in my identity as a whatever I was, a CEO or an entrepreneur and I'm too much of an empath to starve the people I love
the most
from me. Yeah. So thankfully there's that. And yeah, I think those 2 things. And and keeping perspective. I'm always interested in where the mystery goes. I'm fascinated by, is there life on other planets? Why are we here? And that's like an everyday thing. I never stop wondering about how the heck did we get here? What are we doing? And this is all fine and stuff. I guess we could use our hands to make stuff, but where does it go from here? And how are we going to get there? So that's always on my mind.
Awesome. Well, I feel like there's a whole future episode in there somewhere. Yeah. So when you're back, we'll have to have you on. We'll have to maybe go down that road. So I appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks, Trevor.
So with that brings us to a close of this month's episode. We'll see you next month on The Edge. Thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate you watching.